The invitation arrived on a rainy Thursday evening, tucked between grocery store flyers and unread bills. At first, it didn't seem like much, just a casual message from Ayan, a friend from university, someone the narrator hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Small get-together this weekend, just like old times. You in? There was something disarming in the simplicity of it, a kind of warmth that felt foreign after months of emotional fog. With a heart still tender from a recent breakup, the narrator hesitated. But loneliness has a persuasive voice, and soon enough the reply was sent. I'll be there. The drive to the house was quiet, the city humming in the background, headlights casting shadows that disappeared into the rain-slicked streets. It was strange how familiar Ayan's neighborhood still felt. The narrator parked and sat in the car for a moment, watching the soft glow of the porch light, the silhouettes of guests moving behind the curtains. This was supposed to be easy. Simple evening of laughter and nostalgia. A few drinks, a few stories. Nothing more. Inside, the warmth was immediate. Music played low, a blend of soft jazz and indie hits. Ayan greeted with a bear hug, the kind that made you feel momentarily safe. His charm hadn't changed, still the effortless host, still effortlessly likable. Old faces filled the room, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. Conversations flowed easily, and the narrator found themselves laughing more freely than they had in months. Then, a voice, familiar and delicate, cut through the hum of the party. "Didn't think I'd see you here," it said. The narrator turned, and there she was. Zoya, a name that once curled itself into the quiet corners of memory like a soft ache. She hadn't changed much. Same thoughtful eyes, same calm energy. They had known each other in university, shared late-night conversations and almost confessions. But life, in its relentless way, had pulled them in separate directions before anything could begin. "I wasn't planning on it," the narrator replied, managing a smile. "But here I am." They talked at first cautiously, then more freely. Memories surfaced like old photographs, study sessions in crowded cafes, shared glances during lectures, a half-written love letter that never got delivered. Zoya laughed at something trivial, and the narrator felt something shift, just a little, as the evening deepened. People scattered into small clusters, wine glasses refilled, and the mood softened. Zoya stayed close, her presence easy, unforced. It was the kind of closeness that felt both new and familiar, like picking up a forgotten book and finding your place without effort. By the time the narrator stepped outside for air, the night was still, the city quiet. Zoya followed moments later, jacket draped loosely over her shoulders. "It's been too long," she whispered. "Maybe we needed this night." The narrator didn't answer. They didn't need to. Something had started, something they couldn't quite name, but it was enough to stay a little longer. The house had thinned out, voices now murmurs, laughter subdued. The kind of silence that follows joy lingered in the air. Ayan was in the kitchen, clearing wine glasses, humming some forgotten tune. The narrator stood near the window, watching droplets form rivers on the glass. The warmth of Zoya's presence hadn't left since that brief exchange outside. It hovered, tangible and close. Zoya approached again, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. "Still prefer chamomile?" she asked with a knowing smile. The narrator nodded, surprised she remembered. Such a small detail. "Some things don't change," they said. They moved to the corner of the living room, settling into worn cushions by the bookshelf. The fire crackled softly nearby, casting shadows that danced across her face. Their conversation, at first meandering, gradually turned personal. Zoya spoke of her move to another city, her struggles balancing work and relationships, and how she'd lost parts of herself trying to please others. The narrator listened, drawn into the quiet intensity of her voice, the way her words peeled back layers. When it was the narrator's turn, they spoke more honestly than they had in months, about the breakup, the loneliness that followed, the feeling of being invisible in a crowded world. Zoya didn't flinch or offer pity. She simply listened, fully and without interruption. It was rare, the kind of attention that made you feel not just seen, but understood. As the firelight flickered, Zoya leaned back, her fingers brushing lightly against the narrator's. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked. "About what might have happened if timing was different?" The question landed heavily, not as a hypothetical, but as a shared truth they'd both tiptoed around for years. The narrator turned to her, searching her face for meaning. "I used to," they said. "I tried not to, but yeah, I did." She didn't pull her hand away. A song played faintly from the other room, something slow and nostalgic. Without speaking, they stood. She took a step closer, waiting for permission. It was granted in silence. They danced, awkwardly at first, then, with ease, no words, just the sound of breaths and hearts beating too loudly. In those moments, time folded. The years apart, the people who came and went, the regrets, they all faded. There was only the now, the closeness, the possibility. But just beyond the doorway, partially hidden in shadow, Ayan stood watching. His face unreadable, arms crossed, a glass dangling from his fingertips. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak. He simply turned and walked away. Back in the room, the narrator pulled away slightly, enough to meet Zoya's eyes. There was something unspoken in them, something tender, but weighted. "I don't know what this is," the narrator murmured. Zoya smiled faintly. "Maybe it's a beginning," she replied. And yet, even in that fragile warmth, a sliver of unease crept in, unwelcome, but unmistakable. Morning filtered in through linen curtains, casting soft gold across the narrator's room. Despite the brightness, something felt off. Too quiet. Too still. The warmth from the night before lingered in memory. Zoya's touch, her laugh, the closeness that had felt so natural. For the first time in months, the narrator had gone to bed with a heart not weighed down by grief, but buoyed by something resembling hope. That hope cracked the moment their phone buzzed. A message blinked. On the screen from Samir, another friend from the party. "You knew Zoya's engaged to Ayan, right? Thought it was weird seeing you two last night." The words didn't register at first. Engaged? To Ayan. The narrator sat up slowly, the weight of the sentence pressing down like a sudden storm. No, there had to be some mistake. Zoya had said things were complicated, yes, but engaged. That wasn't just complicated. That was betrayal wearing a familiar face. Hands trembling, they scrolled back through memories from the night. Ayan's casual hugs, his silent glances, Zoya's hesitations, her vague words. The signs had been there, subtle, evasive. But the narrator hadn't seen them. Or maybe they hadn't wanted to. Unable to sit with the questions gnawing inside, they sent a single message to Zoya. "Can we talk?" She responded almost instantly. "Come to the park, now." The air outside was colder than expected, brisk with a wind that carried tension. Zoya was already there, sitting on a bench beneath a bare-limbed tree. She looked smaller, somehow, less composed than the night before. When she saw the narrator, her eyes filled with something between guilt and sorrow. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said softly. "So it's true." The words came out harsher than intended. She nodded, unable to meet their gaze. "We've been together for years. It's complicated. We're not happy, and last night, it wasn't planned. It just happened. I didn't expect to feel anything." The narrator's chest tightened, breath shallow. "Then why let it happen? Why let me happen?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the air. I was wondering when this conversation would happen. Ayan stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, face unreadable. He wasn't angry, just distant. Cold. I saw you too, he continued. Every word, every touch. I invited you because I wanted to see if she'd do it again. She did, Zoya gasped. What? You told me you were loyal, Ayan said, his voice void of emotion. I just needed proof. The narrator looked between them, one who used love as a test, the other who treated it as an escape. And in the middle stood their own shattered trust, fragile and bleeding. No more words. The narrator turned and walked away, the weight of that night pressing down with every step. Whatever had begun in tenderness had ended in something else, entirely. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. The days that followed moved like shadows, silent, slow, and heavy with reflection. The narrator didn't respond to the flurry of messages Zoya sent. They varied in tone, some pleading, others apologetic, a few desperate. But none of them changed the truth. She had made a choice, or rather, several, and each one had cost the narrator something irretrievable. They kept replaying Ayan's words. The idea of being used, not just by Zoya, but by Ayan too, scraped deeper than anger. It was humiliation wrapped in betrayal. That night had been more than just a cruel test. It had been a mirror held up to wounds the narrator had spent years burying, and now those wounds were wide open. A week later, Zoya showed up outside the narrator's apartment. No umbrella, no explanation, just soaked in rain and honesty. She didn't beg, didn't justify. She only said, I didn't know how lost I was until I looked at you and remembered who I used to be. The words were sincere, but sincerity didn't stitch broken trust. I cared about you, the narrator said quietly. I think a part of me still does. But that part's no longer. Enough, Zoya nodded, tears mixing with the rain. I just needed you to hear it from me. Not from him, not from anyone else. You should have said it sooner, the narrator replied. And with that, they closed the door, gently but firmly. In the solitude that followed, something unexpected happened. Peace didn't arrive in a wave. It crept in slowly, disguised as silence. The narrator began to fill the void left behind, not with rebound flings or hollow distractions, but with small, meaningful moments. A return to old books, a sunrise jog, reconnecting with family. The spaces that Zoya and Ayan had occupied were still there, but they no longer defined the shape of the narrator's world. One evening, as golden hour painted the city in soft firelight, the narrator sat alone at a cafe, journal open, pen in hand. It had been a long time since they had written anything personal. Words flowed this time, not like wounds being bled, but like seeds being planted. Across the street, a couple laughed, their fingers entwined, their affection unburdened by lies or games. It didn't sting anymore. It simply existed, as love often does, in many forms, for many people, not all of them meant to stay. The narrator smiled, not bitterly, but with quiet gratitude. That night, the so-called gathering hadn't ruined them. It had revealed things they needed to see. The truth about others, yes, but also about themselves. And sometimes, that's the hardest truth of all. Not every connection is meant to last, but every heartbreak carries a lesson. And in learning it, you become someone stronger, wiser, and closer to the love that won't betray you. They turned the page and kept writing,